Shwmae a chroeso I Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
Welcome to this episode of Sgwrs, part of a series in which we explore elements of the national mission for education within Wales, and that is to achieve high standards and aspirations for all. Today we're joined by Alison Withers and Kirsty Rimmer, Head of English and Literacy Coordinator respectively from Bryntirion Comprehensive in Bridgend. Bryntirion is 11 to 18 secondary school with just over 1,200 pupils in total, 178 of which are in the sixth form. The school's recently been through an Estyn inspection, which has highlighted elements of its reading provision as worth sharing more widely. In particular, spotlighting Bryntirion Book Week, which is where we'll start. Welcome, Alison and Kirsty. And Alison, if we can come to you first, as Head of English, you must be really proud to have had the Book Week initiative spotlighted in your Estyn report. Could you just tell us a bit more about it, the background, why you decided to launch that?
Hi Andy, thank you so much for having us today.
You're very welcome.
To be involved. So we were just so incredibly proud of the report that Estyn published. It was a really lovely testament to lots of the hard work that's been going on here over the past, many years. We were long overdue for an inspection. So it's been, many years of really hard work. The English department here is phenomenal. We work incredibly hard and are really effective in lots of the things that we do. We would like to think. So it's been really wonderful to have that validation then from the Estyn report to say that someone else is approving, or that external body is approving of the things that are happening too. So Bryntirion Book Week was the brainchild of Kirsty Rimmer, who's sitting next to me here.
Thank you.
So I've been in post in the school for 2.5 years. And when I started, one of the first things Kirsty said to me was, it is appalling that we do not have a school library anymore. It's not okay. It's such a horrible feeling that we don't have a school library anymore. And we talked about that a little bit and whether there were any ways that we could bring in things like book swaps and having bookcases around for children to borrow books from, making sure that our classrooms are stocked with plenty of books. We had some investment into new sets of class readers and so on, things like that to try and raise the profile of reading across the school. We've got a wonderful teacher within the department who's launched and run several book swaps where students can bring a book that they've read previously and exchange it for another one. And there's been a real buzz around reading and around those things over the past few years. But Kirsty, I remember, said to me at one point, well, let's do something more for World Book Day. Yeah. PE gets Sports Day and the Welsh department get the Eisteddfod and so on. But let's do something big for World Book Day. And then something big for World Book Day turned into, let's have Bryntirion Book Week. So we've worked really, really intensively to try and make sure that Bryntirion Book Week, the inaugural book week, was a success. So we started off by writing to parents with information about what we were doing and why we were doing it, sharing some of the statistics around why reading was important and how we could encourage reading. And then we set up an entire week's worth of events centred around reading. So we had some funding from our head teacher. We were really lucky to have some funding from our head teacher to bring in 3 different speakers. So we targeted year 7, year 8 and year 9, and then also our Seren or math students in 10 and 11, with those three speakers who came in. And then we had a professor who is related to one of our teachers in the department, the professor of creative writing, who was able to come in and run workshops with our students. And it was just a really lovely way to raise the profile of reading through that extracurricular sort of those enrichment experiences. And then we also ran things like, we did Drop Everything and Read, but instead of having the students reading their own material, we created staff sharing with students, opportunities for staff to share reading with students. So we picked a short story, and we actually picked one of the chapters from Bear Grylls' book True Grit. It tells the story of Julianne Koepke, who fell from a plane and trashed through the jungle and survived. And we split the story over 5 different lessons. So at the start of each lesson, the children heard the next part of the story. We were very conscious that we didn't want to make any staff stand and read in front of a class if they desperately didn't want to. And we were looking at how we could increase our use of role models for reading across the school. So we made videos with staff members reading different sections of the story, so that all teaching staff then had the option. They could either read the stories aloud, or they could show the videos, and then the students could follow the story through the day. And then we ran a sponsored readathon with Year 7 and 8, both Year 7 and 8.
So we also run a readathon, and because the first year there's an incredible amount of planning that went into it. So we did have the support of SLT, and that was key to it as well, in getting all staff on board.
Massively.
Looking at that first year, we did reflect on it, critically as well. It was a massive success, but then going forward, we do plan it, I'd say, an academic year ahead almost. And looking at that success, we decided then, Alison came up with a nice idea to tie in our book week for this year under the theme of careers in the arts and literature, because at the moment a lot of funding's being cut, not only obviously in Wales nationally for arts-based projects, so tying it in with videos promoting people who work in the arts, or what they have done if they studied literature or arts-based subjects. So that was a really nice anchor and theme for the week. But going back to my initial idea for the book week, we always would have the annual discussion: what shall we do for World Book Day? Shall we do fancy dress? And I don't agree with World Book Day being a fancy dress event. I think it doesn't promote equitable outcomes for our pupils either, demanding that parents pay for an outfit. And in comprehensive school, it could become, I think it's quite tricky navigating that as well. It's really sensitive in terms of what the children dress up as. And I think it's gone quite too far down that route now, where, you see the costumes in supermarkets, and it should be about the books. And I don't know what it was. I just thought, why are we having a day? Why can't we have a week and celebrate reading? We are in the unfortunate position that we do not have a school library, and it was kind of a multifaceted approach, in the sense that I wanted to promote the joy of reading and reading for pleasure. And it doesn't have to be novels. There's so many different ways to read and enjoy reading, and we just wanted to really celebrate it and role model that you can enjoy literature. It's, not just something that is static and in the classroom. And the feedback from pupils has been astounding, especially from the workshops where they get to see real life writers in the flesh. So that has been fantastic, the pupil voice and the response has. And it rolls into lessons as well then, the enthusiasm. For instance, if I'm studying poetry with Year 8, I can say, look, you had a poet in to work with you, and he had you writing poems, and he was beatboxing at one point. He was absolutely fantastic. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember that now. And you can kind of draw on their experiences, because it's far more visceral than just something on the page. So it's been fantastic. But at the heart of it, I just wanted all the pupils to have this celebration of literature, which was free and accessible to all. Because even though we do have a local county library, there will be pupils who have no books in the house. So it's supporting their access to literature, and their parents might not even take them to the library. So helping them through things like the book swaps, and it's eco-friendly as well. So they get a free book, in addition to the books that Alison arranges as part of the World Book Day token. So the £1 books they usually have for sale in major retailers, very kindly, Alison got in touch with a local business, and we arranged the exchange of the vouchers for the books, because again, some pupils may not have access to certain areas where these books are sold.
So that's what we did in terms of a book giveaway. So we were really fortunate that we made that connection, and we said to the local business, oh, can we have 1,000 books, please. And brilliantly they obliged. So we were able to give students the choice of one of those £1 books as well, which was wonderful. And Kirsty mentioned about the local library. So during this week, one of the other things that we do is we make a point to promote Borrow Box, which is the app, the digital access to the libraries, and make sure that we sign up as many pupils as possible to that. You know, they get the app on their phones, and then they're able to borrow text digitally as well. And then, as Kirsty mentioned, one of the things that has been so important with this is SLT's buy-in. They've been fantastic at just being completely on board and listening to our ridiculous ideas and saying, okay, well, if you can make it work, we can help with that. So, you know, in the first year that we ran it, we were really interested in getting as many staff to contribute and to be involved as possible. So we asked staff, you know, what are your favourite books? And then we made everybody t-shirts with Bryntirion Book Week logo on the front, and then on the back was a copy of their favourite book. And then everyone wore them around the school during that week. So it was a lovely buzz. It gave the students the opportunity to say, oh, Miss, you've been reading Jane Eyre. I really like that too. Or it started those conversations. And then this year we've looked at being slightly more sustainable, and we've looked at buying in and having Bryntirion Book Week lanyards that, again, we can use now again and again in the future. So we've run it for 2 years. The first year we went for go big or go home, and we did go big. And then last year we went for go bigger or go further home. We went even bigger again. And so we started looking already at next year and how we plan on running everything next year. But as Kirsty said, at the heart of it really is that idea of every child has that opportunity to celebrate and enjoy reading and the love of stories and the love of words.
Fantastic. I mean, I think any listeners are in no doubt now of the passion and the enthusiasm and the sort of desire to make this work. It sort of comes through so strongly from you both. There's quite a few bits I'd like to pick up on. I was, first of all, on a practical level, I suppose, the bit about engaging with stakeholders, so engaging with parents. You know, you also mentioned the importance of you know, the leadership team being behind it. You've also mentioned, you know, making sure that teachers didn't feel under pressure to kind of perform and read aloud if that wasn't something that they felt comfortable with. Would you mind just unpacking a little bit for us how you engage with those very different groups of people?
So I think very careful planning. Very, very, very careful planning. Kirsty and I love a spreadsheet. Yeah. We love a spreadsheet. We love a plan. And I think basically we had a communications plan. So we'd worked out who we were communicating with at what time, what communications we were sending out. So it was things like drafting a letter to parents, sending it out a week before. It went out via email and via Sims in touch message. And then opening that avenue of communication for parents to get in touch with us if they had any questions or if there were any queries. And also having things in that initial letter about Borrow Box and about the library, about some of the workshops, the activities their children would be engaging in, but then also about the way that our department is open and available for students to come and borrow books as and when they need to. And again, I think a huge amount of it, as far as the school is concerned, comes down to planning in advance. This wasn't something that happened by accident. It didn't happen the week before. It takes us a huge amount of time to put this together. And by doing it that far in advance and by making sure that everybody knew what was coming, hopefully everybody knew what was coming and at what time, we were able then to get things right, hopefully the first time.
I'm just thinking logistically, if anybody is listening in a school and thinking, all right, how do I start this? The first thing we do, it's ideally we want it around World Book Day, the week to be around World Book Day, but it doesn't always happen to be convenient in a comprehensive school. So we pick a week, and then that week we map out day by day what potential activities we would like to do, and even down to staffing and who is helping us and who is involved. And then then we look at availability for visiting poets and writers to run the workshops.
Scholastic Book Fair.
And yeah, the Scholastic Book Fair, the readathon, Read for Good charity, sorry, they're called Read for Good now, it's kind of rebranded. The readathon we run, we tend to launch that the week prior as well. So the culmination of the readathon is usually then the Friday. And we kind of make year groups compete with one another as well for the readathon, to put that element of competition in, and the heads of year get behind it as well. So logistically it starts out quite dry, so to speak. We're all very excited. It's not dry in the English meeting, and we are literally just mapping out day by day, what does it look like for each year group, what's our focus, logistically who is where. And that's always a really positive meeting, because we ask everybody, we're like, has anybody got any ideas? What can we do? Because we are given money, but it's not a limitless budget.
No.
So ways we can be efficient with our time and costings as well. And it just goes from there. Then basically we logistically plan it out, meet with SLT, and see what other members of staff we can get on board. And Alison puts a lot of work into recording the reading videos, and they are met with such enthusiasm. Even the sixth formers want to watch them. She'll be teaching an A-level lesson, and they're like, "Oh, Miss, what's the next part of the story?" And you'd think they'd be a bit blasé at kind of 17, 18, but they really get behind it as well. Another new thing we've done this year, we now have our literacy ambassadors within the school. They're called literacy ambassadors, but they are, a kind of merging of literacy and the English department, and they are another asset to us in promoting and supporting these events as well. They've been fantastic.
They've been brilliant, and what's been lovely with that group of students is they've really come to us and said, this is what we would like to do. So around Easter time, they wanted to do an Easter book hunt. So we put hidden tokens around the school, and children across all years could go and find them, and then they brought them back. We gave books as prizes and little sweets as prizes and things like that. And again, there was a real buzz around it. And then, and I'm hesitant to say this because we're still in planning for this, but next week they would like our own version of the Hay Festival in school. So to finish the year, we're finishing with Brynfest Book Fest on Wednesday next week. So we're finishing with a book festival then on Wednesday next week is the plan at present. So again, a huge amount of work going into that, and Eloise in our department is leading on that. But as far as engaging stakeholders is concerned, I think just finding out what people are willing to do, what people are able to do, and making the most of that, making the most of resources you've already got available to you. So for example, in the first year, we made little stickers for everybody that we just printed in school, and bookmarks that we just printed on card in school that is a very, very minimal cost, but really helped us to raise the profile of Book Week across the school. And banners are brilliant.
I would say, just to add to that, the one thing I think that I don't want to say the word struggle, but it is hard to find visiting writers for schools that obviously are available during the time slot, and again are within the budgetary kind of constraints as well. So that's where the wider teacher network and teachers who are former colleagues or friends, they were really helpful in recommending people who had visited their schools that we weren't aware of too. And that is something I think that is something that's very helpful when we share these kind of positive interactions as well.
And Arts Council Wales are always willing to make recommendations as well, which is really helpful.
I mean, that what comes through there is just that it's a real whole school event, as you've said, and banners are brilliant. Sounds like a great strapline for any whole school event, and making sure it's really visible. But I also really like some of your comments around equity and around that inclusivity of events like this, and that can often sort of be forgotten. And I suppose also, I think it's fair to say that levels of overt deprivation in Bryntirion are probably lower than for some schools in the region, and for other schools in the region, there's no getting away from deprivation levels. But I think it's really useful that schools like yours are also thinking about every learner, and every learner being able to access events and to buy into that sort of buzz that you've described. Alison, do you want to say a bit more?
I think where we've really focused on that this year is through our focus on careers. So this year's Bryntirion Book Week, everything was still focused around books and reading and that love of literature, but we added the lens of careers and the future. So we looked at, what can you do with English? How do we use English in the future? How do industry professionals use English and reading and that love of literature? Where can it get you? And where can it help you to enjoy your journey along the way as well? And one of the really lovely things for us was the four visiting.
We had 1 week prior, yeah, 4.
We did.
Yeah.
The 4 visiting speakers that we had in this year, we'd said to them all, we've got a real focus on careers this year. Could you open whatever you're delivering with a very brief, very, very brief account of how you've gotten to be where you are, what your journey was, and so that can help to inspire some of our students as well. And they took to that
fantastic,
brilliantly, absolutely brilliant.
They were all from different backgrounds as well, so it was really interesting hearing how they got to the point where they were professional writers or poets, professors, and so forth. And I think, all of them came initially. They didn't initially start out as writers, so to speak. So they changed careers as well. So showing our learners that yes, it's not about that one job. It's something that kind of can be fluid throughout your life. You're allowed to change your mind and have new passions as well. So that was really useful for them to see people talking through these kind of journeys in literature, and also talking about their failures in literature. So saying you will be rejected, you will, metaphorically speaking, fall down, but it's how you get back up. And I think it's good for them to see that, because obviously we'd say that to them as well, but when they have an external visitor, it reinforces that message.
Very much so. So in terms of equity and in terms of inclusivity, one of the things that we all know as teachers is that a lack of having can lead to a lack of ambition. So we,
don't you?
We've really tried to combat that where we can with this, and we're really proud of the way that some of these things have worked. And
thinking of equity in the sense of inclusivity, we make a concerted effort to make sure we've got a ALN resource base within our school, that they are also included and the staff are included, for instance, in the reading videos, and that the reading resources are accessible to the learners there as well. So not just thinking of an economic kind of standpoint, but also of in terms of literacy and ALN. So it's been really interesting how we kind of approach it, but I hope that everybody feels included. But yes.
Yeah, very much so. And you've talked there a little bit about that broader context then, beyond the Book Week event and the sort of impact, and that also comes through, I think, in the Estyn spotlight in the report. So that makes further comments and judgments about pupils' reading. And if I can just read a quick quote, I think it says, many pupils analyse texts, including poems, music, artwork, and historical sources suitably, supporting their points with evidence such as quotations from texts. So what stood out for me there was the range of texts that are mentioned here. So how was the school and your role within that ensured that pupils are exposed to this range of texts, that they're engaging with them, and that those texts are of a high quality?
It's been a very long journey, because I've been literacy coordinator a very unstereotypical amount of time. So I've been literacy coordinator for about a decade, which people don't usually hold the post for that long. And I think going back a few years, we did an audit of literacy within the school, and we audited the text types that pupils were being exposed to. And one thing we were very aware of is either texts were far too complex, or teachers, meaning well, were oversimplifying them, so reducing them down to bullet points. So you were taking away the kind of work essentially for the pupils in reading the text. So as a result of that audit, we did have a lot of staff training and insets and so forth. And if some teachers listening can kind of cast their minds back, we did do a lot of the tactical teaching training as well around kind of extracting information from texts. And it's something that's been ongoing, obviously, and reflected upon within school. And then as we've audited text types, we also audited writing types as well across the curriculum. And it was obviously tying in with the introduction of the LNF and so forth, kind of bringing it back to the current time period. It's linking to the new development and launch of reading behaviours within our school. So using those reading behaviours, I think it's not only for pupils, it is something that staff are using to reflect on their teaching and pedagogy. And that is something Alison's been working on this year, launching them and developing them and embedding them in departments and with learning support staff as well. So would you like to say more about that, Alison?
Yeah, so we were frustrated with some of the data that we were seeing coming out of our national reading tests, because the data was saying to us that students in our setting were performing very well on the more complex questions where they needed to compare or sequence or infer or analyse and make connections between texts. But they were less successful in the lower order reading skills that were things like retrieval, and we did lots of discussing, you know, what the potential issues might be around that, including things like, you know, they're doing the tests on the Chromebooks. Are they just randomly clicking? Are they actually reading the text? They've got to look at the text and then click off it to give the answer. Are they actually bothering to go back and forth? You know, lots of things around effort and around actually whether the skill was a deficit or whether it was an effort deficit. But what we came to really was that we needed to do something about it, and that we needed to help students to be developing those skills and to be using those skills in a much wider range of contexts than just relying on using them within the English department, which obviously we knew was happening. But what we also know is that students don't necessarily transfer skills from subject to subject particularly easily, especially if they don't realise that they are expected to use the same skill in different subjects. So they may be able to compare in history and to compare in English, but if we call them two different things, then they may not realise that what they're doing is the same skill. So we went back to the reading behaviours that were initially, I believe, developed by Swansea local authority, I think around 2017.
Yeah.
Around there. And we had a look. I used to work with a teacher who had been teaching previously in Swansea, and she brought with her to the school that we were in the Swansea reading behaviours. And so we went back and we looked at those. And what we decided to do was to develop what we have coined the Bryntirion Reader. So the idea of the Bryntirion Reader is it's a series of 4 reading behaviours that every student should be encouraged to actively engage with when they engage with a text. And those 4 reading behaviours for us are activating prior knowledge, self-monitoring, questioning, and retrieving. So are they, when they look at a new text, are they thinking about what they already know about that topic, what they already know about those ideas, and are they bringing that with them? And are we encouraging them as teachers to do that? Are they questioning the text as they are reading it? Are they asking questions about what they're reading? Are they recognising the words that they don't understand? And are they helping to understand them then in some ways? Are they ensuring that they do understand them in some way? And then are they retrieving information from the text? Are they able to access that information? So we've launched this across the school. We've done insert training. We twice now, 2 lots of insert training for teaching staff and for support staff. And what we've looked at really is how we are encouraging staff to reinforce those expert reading behaviours with students, how they are reinforcing those positive, active reading behaviours, and then how we can disseminate that information amongst our our collective of primary schools and other schools nearby. So we've shared this with staff. We found that it's been a really useful way for lots of staff in terms of planning what they're going to be doing with the texts that they're reading with students, but also massively useful for support staff as well, because it's given support staff a framework through which to approach texts, written texts for students to read as well.
I think that really links in. We talked right at the beginning about high standards and aspirations, and really what we're talking about is aspirations and expectations of, potentially novice readers or certainly developing readers, of what they're going to actually get from texts. So we've had lots of conversations at cluster level, primary and secondary, about implementation of reading behaviours. And it's interesting, the sort of cognitive science background that remind us that these are behaviours rather than skills that develop over or that improve through repeated teaching. More so that, as you've described them, these are behaviours that expert readers display. Expert readers have those high expectations of text, that they will paint a visual picture, or that use of inference will be key to discovering a sort of deeper meaning or a slightly more nuanced meaning to text. And I think that really comes through with your description of it, that this is about raising expectations of what you get from texts. And I think there's real power in that shared vocabulary, isn't there?
Yes, massively.
If everybody's talking about activation of prior knowledge, and everybody's sharing that sort of shortcut in terms of labeling, then, as you say, the implementation and the interpretation of that on the ground might look quite different, but that shared vocabulary makes it really efficient and makes it part of the school culture, doesn't it? Yeah.
So things like having logos for these 4 behavioural or 4 reading behaviours, and having a copy of those logos in every single classroom, so that teachers can very conveniently gesture to one of them when they're asking students to ask questions. Now we are questioning the text, is again, I like that word, shortcut. It's a really useful shortcut. And we've been very clear with staff and said, with lots of texts, you could use all 4 reading behaviours, all 4 of our Bryntirion reading behaviours with ease. But what we also don't want to do then is move time away too significantly from subject content teaching. So again, that shortcut with 1 or 2 skill behaviours applied or used at a time is a useful way for students to keep being reminded that this is what expert readers will do instinctively.
Lovely. I think that's such a powerful message, and really worth spending a bit of time here unpacking it. Both the theory, which is great, but also the in-school practice, which is invaluable, I think. So the enthusiasm is undimmed, and we've covered a whole range of issues and considerations that have clearly gone into not just Book Week, but the broader curriculum for reading. Could you tell us a bit about your next steps? I know you've mentioned making Bryntirion Book Week even bigger and bolder than ever. Is there anything else that you've got on the horizon? You're clearly very ambitious for your pupils and their reading experiences. Yeah, Kirsty.
Obviously, you mentioned the Summer Book Festival. We're already planning Book Week. It pains me to say this, 2026. It's scary.
As long as we're on 2026 and not 2027.
Yeah. And we are down a library essentially in our school. Logistically speaking, the fabric of the school kind of restricts us, but we are now looking at being resourceful and setting up a small classroom-based lending library. And it will also be the space where our literacy intervention teacher reside, so to speak. So we're kind of marrying up then the kind of, joy of reading, and the pupils who go to literacy intervention, it's separate to our ALM provision, can see, this is an environment where we come to enjoy reading and enhance our lives, because reading isn't only obviously about the words on the page, it's about the places it takes them to as well. So the different countries, the different feelings, the different experiences, and just giving them that break from day-to-day life and the ever-present devices. And that kind of mental health break as well. So that is something, I think that's one of our main focuses now, is setting up some kind of school library again. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some classroom changes happening now over the next week or so, and that frees up that little bit of space, hopefully for us to set up that space, which will be really important for us in having that central location. And then we're obviously continuing to look at Book Week. We're looking at Book Fest and how we take that further on next year as well. And then I think really for us going into next year, we are planning for how we can make best use of our literacy ambassadors as well. So looking at how pupil voice really can feed into what we're doing with students, how we're doing it with students, what they want, and what they need as well.
As part of the Book Fest as well, we have devised our own summer reading challenge. So a lot of the local county libraries offer summer reading challenges, and we've invented our own one. So we've come up with, I think it's 5 categories, and Alison designed a beautiful passport style resource, and we're going to offer it to pupils and staff, because I think we all, even though we're English practitioners and literacy specialists, we always kind of put off I haven't got time. So the challenges are, read something by an author from a different country, or a country you've never been to, or something that no one would ever expect you to see reading, and so that's something we're looking at as well. And even little simple things like I know Class Shot is used a lot by local schools. We've asked SLT to add a button that if you spot a child reading for pleasure around the school, so we do, you see children sitting and reading quietly, that we can then say to that child, right, we're going to give you positive points on Class Shot for that reason, because we need to celebrate and reinforce there's a positive behaviour.
And then apart from that, we'll carry on with our themed book swap. So we love a Halloween themed book swap, and a Christmas themed book swap, which, gives students the opportunity to come and swap their reading materials around. And they write some lovely recommendations on little post-it notes, and they put them on the books to suggest for someone else to read them. We're looking at whether we can supply Year 7 coming in, all of New Year 7, with a reading book to be reading over the summer holidays, and encouraging that love of reading and that support from our side as well. And we just continue and it's been a pleasure. It's been hard work. The last few years. It's been a real pleasure to feel like, just to sit here and say, oh, we do this and we've tried this and we've done this and we've done this, and actually these are the impacts that they've had, is a really lovely thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm going to emphasize that it is very hard work, the week of Book Week, but once we get the other side, there's a sense of elation and relief. But it is, but it's all in the planning and getting people on board. That's the main thing.
Diolch am wrando ar y benod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our online communities via our website, and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.